Welcome to the L&D Podcast with your host, Nick Day of JGA Recruitment, specialist HR recruiters. This podcast is sponsored by Think Learning, specialists in learning and performance technologies. Visit thinklearning.com to find out more.
Hello and welcome to the Learning and Development Podcast, sponsored by Think Learning. Today I am joined by Lars Hyland, Chief Learning Officer at Totara Learning. Lars has a deep knowledge of learning technology in all its forms and is passionate about how it can be harnessed to deliver effective and engaging learning experiences, both in the workplace and in education. He has over 27 years of experience in the design and implementation of large-scale learning programs and performance improvement solutions, and he has worked with a wide range of international organizations, including Sky, Tesco, Nestle, Amex, and McDonald's, to name just a few. Lars also has the expertise and experience of working within the higher education sector, including the University of Oxford, the University of Cambridge, the Open University and City University, again, among many others. In 2015, Lars took over as Chief Commercial Officer at Totara and was responsible for developing Totara's partner network and worldwide subscribers. He's now working as the Chief Learning Officer, responsible for the overall success of Totara's business operations in Europe, Middle East and Africa. And the Totara Learning platform is an open source, highly flexible platform which brings powerful freedoms to all organizations with formal and informal learning needs, both within the workplace and the extended enterprise. They are used in most industry sectors, and customers range from small to large multinational corporations, so very much a testament to their cost effectiveness, flexibility and scalability. So first, I would like to welcome Lars to the L&D Podcast. Welcome, Lars. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good.
Fantastic.
L&D Podcast Discovery, questions to set the scene.
Lars, you're very passionate about open source technology, but for anyone else that might not be familiar with this term, are you able to explain what this is and perhaps let the listeners know why you believe this is a key for organizations and for L&D specifically?
Yes, of course. Well, a lot of software that we know is proprietary in nature, and that means as a customer or as a user, you have no control or access to that underlying code. So open source technology, well, it means just that. It's open for you to inspect, extend, change, and it ensures the customer, especially when we're talking about large organizations or organizations of any shape and size, it's increasingly important I think, to have control over that technology that you're investing in. So, and in today's digital landscape, there's a lot of change, there's a lot of uncertainty, and as a result, if you're working with proprietary types of software, then there's more constraint on you as to when and where and how you can adjust those tools to actually deliver on the business needs that you're facing. And if we're in today's digital landscape and going forward, software does need to be sustainable. So strategically, that means bringing open technology, I think, into the heart of those technology investments so that they do retain control and that they've got a wider set of support options available. So you're not locked into the pace and commercial stability of any one software vendor. You've got choice, and that freedom, especially in a time of rapid change and trying to manage business risks, it gives you much more agility over remaining competitive and differentiating yourself in chosen markets. So in short, we believe, and I think increasingly the wider sort of technology market is believing that it's the right type of strategic choice going forward.
Great. That makes sense. And obviously open source technology is one way that organizations can embrace that rapid change that you talk about. How else do you think L&D teams can keep up with the rate of change that's happening with the industry?
Well, it's difficult. I know that well, working with learning and development folk in across the world.
Sure.
But there's lots of competing calls on the time and attention of learning professionals, and the key thing though is to work out ways to distinguish between the hype and the helpful technology developments themselves. So keeping up with that change, I think, it means cultivating a deeper, more critical understanding of how learning technology actually works and how it actually impacts learning outcomes. And, one of the things that we're working on here at Totara is that we'd like to sort of create a space, what we're calling that the Totara community, and to invite learning professionals in to stay up to speed. So that, how do you keep up to speed with that type of change? I think that's, you need the right sort of places to collaborate and find others who are dealing with very similar issues and problems. And from our perspective, with our global presence, a lot of our Totara subscribers, as we call them, around the world, can do just that through the Totara community.
Great. That's quite rare, I think, for a software provider, if you like, to be so collaborative with its users. It's not something that I'm as familiar with some of the other software companies that I've worked with, particularly on the payroll side, slightly different to L&D. But it sounds like you're quite a collaborative approach in order to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, indeed, and our approach at Totara, being an open technology company, we favour openness and collaboration, and believe that in the round, that's what will generate success for all of those organisations that choose to leverage our Totara solutions. And as for the reasons I've just mentioned before, being able to embrace rapid change is critical.
Sure.
And to do that, you need to have that control, I think, and the freedom to do just that.
So obviously you've seen the industry change significantly over the 27 years. Obviously at the moment, with technology advancing as quickly as it is, sort of that's probably changing faster now than ever before. But from your experience of working with L&D for such a long time, what do you think have been the key factors that have driven L&D forwards to where it is today? And are you able to remember a time when there's has been as much change as we see today?
Well, funnily enough, I think that the workplace learning environment, which I have been working in over 27 years, and alongside some of the higher education that you mentioned earlier, but primarily the workplace learning space, I think has sort of moved forward on two parallel tracks. On the technology track, clearly that's changed profoundly, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, over the years. So I started life designing sort of isolated interactive video disc solutions.
Oh, wow.
Many listeners won't know what I'm talking about there, but through CD-ROMs and then onto using full HD video streaming across the internet, all from, say, a handheld device. The things that we're dealing with now, from a technology perspective, has moved very, very dramatically. However, our shared sort of understanding of how learning actually works and our ability to design effective learning experiences hasn't really moved at anywhere near that same pace, which makes it very easy to invest in technology solutions that can have little or no learning impact, which is disappointing, clearly, and can be expensive. But that said, that is changing. There's a lot more movement now in a deeper understanding of how learning works, and there's some exciting things brewing, I think, around taking that more seriously and leveraging the available technology to deliver that effective learning, which will lead to productivity benefits and improved performance for all.
Sure. And they're all areas I'm keen to try and sort of delve out of you a little bit later on in the podcast. But before we get there, tell us a little bit more about your journey then today. You've obviously got 27 years working in the design and implementation of learning programs for, as I mentioned in the introduction, a various number of very sort of big scale, large corporate organizations. But how's your journey led you to becoming involved with Totara Learning? Well,
back in the early 90s, which is when I sort of joined what was a very nascent sector. We had different names for it back then: multimedia, computer-based training, hypermedia. They're all a whole range of forgotten terminology. But in essence, I did spot early on that there was this coming together of computer technology and learning, and then being able to apply the two together to help people learn more efficiently and more effectively would grow into something quite significant, and it has. It's and it continues to evolve, and I think it continues to move more center stage. But I've worked in a range of what you might call learning content agencies, so building interactive learning solutions for, as you say, a variety of large organizations who were interested in reaching thousands of staff to sort of deliver a more effective learning experience. But then as time goes by, and having worked with quite a lot of bleeding edge technologies, things that were brand new back then, things like, personal digital assistants, which have clearly evolved into full smartphones, and working on sort of solutions that would meet a particular need with a particular organization, but the reach of those, may be quite relatively small. So that sort of led me down the track to Totara and Totara Learning and its global sort of influence, and being able to get more involved with a much wider reach and a much wider audience to offer what is a sort of a foundational, fundamental, open technology solution that can really impact the world of work. And we've got that. We've now moved quite quickly, and we've got 11 million learners that use Totara around the world. That's 1,600 organizations worldwide, and I think an important sort of community of 7,000 learning professionals that use the product to deliver learning in many, many countries. I think it's 45 countries now around the world. So it's very exciting to see how open technology really is being embraced, and we're making I think quite a interesting and disruptive effect on those traditional proprietary software models.
So I know from your website, Lars, there's a number of references to Totara disrupting the technology, if you like, or offering a disruptive solution and disrupting the landscape of L&D technology. I wonder if you could just expand on that in a little bit more detail.
Sure. Totara was founded on 4 fundamental freedoms, and these are freedom to innovate, the freedom of choice, freedom to save, and the freedom to learn. First and foremost, we believe that organizations need that freedom to innovate, that they need to create a platform that is suitable for their particular needs, and that they are able to adapt to change, as I mentioned earlier. And this is about trying to future-proof investment, but in a flexible way, given that you're needing to respond to rapid uncertainty and change. Now, to do that, that's why we're an open technology. It gives you freedom and access to that code base, particularly through our partner network, to be able to deliver those solutions as and when you need them. That also gives you some choice as well. There's a global community of providers that we partner with, and they can offer different Totara implementation solutions and options. These are all over the world, and they face off to different markets and different sectors. And they can take the Totara open technology and deliver to that in a very precise way, down to an individual organization's way. It can be bespoke, but it's open and flexible. Sure. So that the key point here is it's all about custom code per se. It's actually more about having a shared technology platform that does evolve. It keeps innovating. We're innovating at the core, but partners and organizations are not precluded from delivering a particular differentiated solution at the point in time they need it. They're not in lockstep with a sort of a core roadmap in that way, or clearly there is a core roadmap that we provide. Now, all of this means that there's a freedom to save both money and time. There's no expensive software licensing involved. It's based around a subscription model that is based around a support model. And as a result, the total cost of ownership is significantly less than proprietary approaches.
Sure.
And you also have that extra addition of flexibility, which all culminates in what is our strapline, which is freedom to learn. That means that those organizations can deliver effective learning experiences to their learners and therefore meet the business demands that they're facing in whichever region or sector that they're operating in.
It's quite a holistic learning environment that you offer, or approach.
Well, yes, it is. It's holistic in many different ways, in the sense that there's the core functionality that we very much drive the development of, with the support and direction of our partners and customers around the world. But there's also a very flexible ability to plug in additional functionality or additional modules of functionality that will meet a particular integration requirement, etc. So that's not unusual, arguably, but the key difference here is that if there's a specific need, it can be met.
Okay.
There's no real obstacle to doing that, other than time and dedication to do it.
So within the 4 fundamental freedoms, you mentioned freedom to innovate, freedom to save, freedom to learn. But within the freedom of choice element, you talked about there being a global community of providers that you work with. So I just wanted to find out more as to why Totara have decided to develop a model that supports the global sort of partner network process, if you like. So why have you taken that approach, and why for your business or for Totara has it been so successful? Do you see your partners in competition with each other, or as a sort of collaborative network? It's kind of a unique approach.
It is supported open source technology, bit of a mouthful, but that supported nature of open source technology, I think, gives you the best of all worlds. It means that you've got a common, flexible, feature-rich core platform, and that can be harnessed to meet the specific needs of industry sectors, regions, and individual organizations, as I previously mentioned. It means that we, Totara, can focus from the outset on the research and development, and we work and facilitate expert partners to meet the solution needs of any customers that they have. So this is very scalable. It means that we focus on what we're expert at, and it allows our partners to be differentiated around the world and around all sectors and all needs to develop solutions that are very competitive. It means that those partners enjoy strong and really good revenue streams as a result, and that means that there's a very strong and keen focus on customer service and solutions that they can deliver. So there's a lot of elements and forces that sort of balance nicely to create an environment that is at its heart quite collaborative. Everyone has an interest in developing the Totara community as a whole, and that leads to us building functionality that meets the widest sort of community requirements and needs. And yet each individual partner has the freedom to differentiate themselves and to in a very, very focused way deliver particular customer requirements when and where they need them. So answering your question about are partners in competition with each other, or is it more collaborative? Well, it's a bit of both, and it depends on the density, if you like, of partners that operate in any particular perhaps market or region. But in the main, we see a willingness to collaborate.
It must be a fantastic way to stay ahead of the curve as well, because presumably all of your network partners were going to be feeding back to you all the time about what their clients are looking for, new innovations, things that may be able to improve the product or keep it ahead of the technology curve, if you like. So I'm assuming that's part of that collaborative network that you're talking about. It's not just collaboration in terms of how the solution they offer the clients, but collaborative coming back to you in terms of how you can continue to develop the product.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we get a very rich feedback from all our partners, and we get quite a good insight into how different sort of regions and markets are focusing on particular functional needs or trends. And it's our job. It can be quite challenging sometimes to sort of unpick, those particular priorities, etc. But, at its heart, what we're trying to do is facilitate the widest set of opportunities for our partners to then go on and supplement the solutions that they offer their customers. Yeah. So, but it's a very powerful network effect, if you like, that we see, and it gives us a really strong insight as to the sort of direction in which the sort of learning technology sector is moving.
Absolutely. I don't. You may not be able to give any competitive secrets away as such, but are there any recent examples of sort of feedback that's come back that's any new developments coming out that you're working on as a result of some of that collaborative feedback at the moment on the L&D side?
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of this has culminated actually in a focus that we're taking around our Totara products, and that is to ensure that and structure the Totara products around a platform that enables us to deliver a series of products. So we have Totara Learn, which is a learning management platform that is very, very popular, and all of this feedback has led us to schedule the development of Totara Perform, which is a performance management product, which will take into consideration some big changes in performance management around, it's quite a big shift away from the sort of annual appraisal approach, checking in on sort of an annual basis, to one that's more about continuous performance.
So more like real time.
More real time, exactly, approach. And, there's more and more organizations demanding that, or wishing they had that type of feedback mechanism in place. And if it's tightly coupled with the learning management aspect, so the learning and development training, etc., that is available to your staff, then the combination of the two can be, quite powerful in orienting the development needs of individuals across the organization, and also to start thinking about how you positively and proactively develop talent, spot and develop talent across the organizations. But also it also leads to thinking about how individuals socially support each other inside an organization. So social learning, but also collaborating and how they engage. So we've also got another product called Totara Engage, which is part of that sort of platform approach. So the combination of learn, perform, and engage is quite comprehensive, and very much positions that platform for what is a modern approach to sort of learning and development support
Sure.
in organizations.
No, that's a fantastic example. I can see how that would be useful in recruitment, to be honest. We're always appraising performance here and it's very real time. And if we can, develop our staff at the same time, if we're able to spot potential training areas of weakness, if you like, that are affecting performance, be able to make those changes in a real time environment, I think is fantastic. Brilliant. Well, I would like to find out a little bit more about the main priorities that perhaps people should have within L&D at the moment. But first, I'd just like to find out a little bit more about you, Lars, if we can.
Before we do, we're just going to go to a quick advert break from our sponsors, Think Learning.
Engage, learn, perform with Think Learning, specialists in learning and performance technologies. We're experts in solving the challenges of targeting, tracking, training in regulated environments. We have developed the Totara platform to provide a cost-effective, organisation-wide talent solution that can help you to provide a safer and better place to work. Customisable workflows promotes engagement through onboarding and induction, whilst an intuitive user interface helps drive ongoing engagement with learning. Bespoke workflows for performance appraisal and integration to payroll and recruitment systems transform Totara into a powerful and holistic talent platform. You'll find us to be responsive, collaborative and solution focused. Visit thinklearning.com for more information. Time to find out more about you.
How would your friends or your work colleagues describe you?
Well, you'd have to ask them, I guess. But, I think they think I was pretty good company. And but in a work context, I'd like to think that they, I help them to succeed and develop in their roles. That's very much my main focus as Chief Learning Officer role here at Totara Learning. And, I like to think we've got a really open and strong culture at Totara.
Sure.
And that spans, by the way, where I'm speaking to you from right now, which is Brighton in the UK on the south coast, with our headquarters, which is actually in Wellington, New Zealand.
Yes.
So we from the ground up, we've been a virtual company, but also spanning the globe. And we sort of drink our own champagne, shall we say, and eat our own dog food in terms of using our own tools and software to deliver that collaboration that is essential for us to operate, and that just correlates directly into all of our customers out there.
Well, I should take the opportunity then I'll let you tell the listeners why, but I know the name Totara comes from a New Zealand tree, doesn't it?
That's right, it does. Yes, it's a protected tree now, and it's renowned for its flexibility and its resilience. I think that aligns quite nicely with our approach to software development. Sure. and how we're meeting the market. So it's an interesting sort of link to the natural world.
Excellent. So professionally or personally, what is your proudest achievement to date?
I mean, personally, being able to raise a family and I'm very proud of, two fantastic young adults now as children. They're smart, sociable, and I hope successful. And it's interesting seeing the world through their eyes, and seeing how the world of work for them it's quite challenging, in fact, and how things are changing. But of course, most of the credit goes to my partner, Pamela, clearly in that area. But professionally speaking, best is yet to come, I think, Nick.
Great. Well, I think it's the best answer to have. Best is yet to come. I think it is interesting. We do a lot of analysis on, from a recruitment perspective, on Generation Z, and the way things have changed, certainly in the last 3 to 4 years in particular, has been phenomenal. And it's amazing, to have children, even if I've got a 9-year-old, be able to feed off what she's already able to do at 9 years old, to see how the industry is changing is quite remarkable. So I guess we can always learn, even from my younger ones.
Well, definitely. And, their approach to technology and their expectations of how they interact with others and how they would work and what their aspirations are quite different to what a lot of organizations and how they're structured, and I think there's some challenges ahead into how organizations do structure themselves. Sure. and how they structure job roles themselves. So there's a lot of change ahead.
Are there any times you can tell us about where perhaps things haven't gone the way you wanted, or not from a professional standpoint, maybe within the learning sector? Is there something that that you planned with a great outcome but didn't quite deliver in the way that you'd anticipated?
Yeah, I mean, that happens all the time, Nick, in terms of delivering technology projects, especially, when I've been working, delivering particular solutions, sort of less so here at Totara, where that's very much the remit of our partners. Sure. But, having back in the day when delivering particular solutions, or even I built a platform myself, which was all about delivering learning transfer. So I think I was quite early in spotting what is an intractable issue when it comes to training, which is too often a lot of people go into training, courses or sit in classrooms, and they go through that experience, good or bad, and then they come back into their work and they forget it all.
Yeah,
nothing changes. Nothing changes at all. So old habits are just reinforced. So I built a platform which was aimed at delivering a constant but spaced set of reminders and around how learning could be reinforced. And that was built out of research. And in fact, I did this quite a number of years back. And what I learned was that the technology was absolutely sound, and the approach was good. We had some good customers, but the timing was quite critical.
Okay.
In terms of going to market, and were organizations really ready to understand that as an area that they need to invest in further? So, I mean, it's a common thing, I think, in business. It's you can have a great idea, but and you need to be be able to execute well, but also timing is quite critical.
You're actually ahead of your time
to success.
Yeah.
I've suffered from that a lot over the years, in terms of a lot of solutions I've offered to people, as I mentioned to earlier, like terminology like portable digital assistants, things like that, offering those to companies, and they love the idea, but they just never quite invested in it at the time. They buy everything else, but they wouldn't buy that part. So, but and one of the things I think that's attracted me and continues, I think, to sort of fuel Totara's success is that we are meeting a very fundamental need in that shift that is happening in learning and development and the adoption of technology. Learning management it never goes away if you're going to need to reorient, if you like, and encourage new behaviors in hundreds and thousands of people within a defined time frame. You need very well structured learning and development to be in place, and you need to manage that and track progress, etc. So data is very important to that process. And but it needs to be accessible, it needs to be flexible, and it needs to be of good value to reach the widest possible sort of audience. And I think that's what we're seeing now. It's taken quite a long time for the learning and development world to sort of properly grapple with, in the mainstream, learning technologies. I think they're getting to understand it better. Sure. And some support mechanisms like we have, Totara Community, for example, is one area where that sort of understanding starts to develop. But that's quite critical, I think, to future adoption being more rapid and more successful.
Absolutely. I'd agree. I mean, look, I'd consider you very much a key leader, Lars, within the L&D learning space. From your perspective, as Chief Learning Officer at Totara Learning, what do you think are the 3 key qualities a leader needs to have to demonstrate great leadership?
Yes, that will vary depending on the organization, its culture and its mission. But I think in my book, it's to lead by example, look for opportunities to develop and build the confidence of your staff so that they perform at their best, and to provide some vision for the company so that everyone can genuinely be excited by. So at Totara, we do believe we're changing the way our industry works, and that's tremendously satisfying and motivating.
Tell me about a recent L&D project or problem that perhaps you made better, faster, smarter, or more efficient.
Well, that's an interesting one in the sense that at Totara, we've got nearly 200 case studies that anyone listening can take a look at on totaralearning.com. So those case studies, and it's difficult to pick any one out, but if you go there, you'll find one that's relevant to your sector and or your particular sort of need. And the reason I hesitate a little bit is because they're our partners, customers.
Sure.
So they're all Totara customers. So I definitely point to some of those. We have some great relationships with partners such as Think, who've I know do a lot in the health sector. We have other partners who specialize in other types of sectors, both in NGOs, for example. So we're strong there, but in particular local government and in the retail type sector. There's some great examples out there in terms of extending enterprise. So that means reaching out in a very open way to either your customers or your own resellers. So there's one example which is around hair care, for example. So that's reaching out to hairdressers, and there's lots of hairdressers in the world, I can assure you, and offering training to them, in the way that they're using Totara as a platform behind that. They can reach a lot of people cost effectively with our approach, as opposed to, say, building it on a proprietary type of platform. So it's that's quite a distinctive approach there. But I'd encourage everyone listening to go look at that case study page, because there's over 200.
I'll make sure I put
examples
a link in the episode notes, so if people are interested in checking out those case studies. I'll put a direct link so people can just check out the episode notes of this L&D podcast, and it should take you straight through to those case studies. It'd be great. Now, I know you started your career as an instructional designer. Does that mean you've always had a passion for learning from the outset, or did you fall into the industry?
I actually did have a passion for it early on.
Great.
A lot of people have fallen into this industry from various different other endeavors. And I fell into it at the point of doing a master's degree, interestingly, in music technology. So what I found was that was an interesting experience, because I was using technology. I was also working with very creative musicians as well, and I thought I was one of those, and I was somewhere in the middle between those two extremes.
Any particular instrument of interest?
Keyboard, fun. But more than that, actually, we were using software. We were playing and building some of the first software synthesizers that now you take for granted, or I take for granted, just on my mobile phone. But we were doing that. But what I found was I was writing and creating software that had help on it. No one else was. And I was also interested in interfaces and making them really direct and easy to use. So I found I was drawn to that sort of area. And I did a thesis actually on what was back then called hypermedia learning environments.
Wow.
Which basically predated the browser pretty much, just about. So that dates it. But what I learned was that through that research was that learning happens through doing. Sounds obvious and trite, but actually a lot of the training world still thinks learning happens abstractly, sure. And then you away from doing. And that what if you could you build an environment that you could do things in? So in this case, create music, but also have a learning environment built right in. So you had very close access to learning and support as you went, which, if you think about it, is only really starting to emerge in various areas. So the new trends, so I say new, but the new areas of focus around performance support, the use of AI, chatbots, building in sort of automated support into people's job workflows and things like that actually direct you to the right answers, or give you faster tracks into getting to the right answers, so that you can then put it into practice straight away. Also the areas of augmented reality, things like that. In principle, that's the root of it.
As another example of you being slightly ahead of your time.
Far too ahead of the time at that point. But it's also interesting. Learning point was also around knowing your audience, knowing who you're providing learning for. So in my case, that was musicians, and that's an interesting bunch of characteristics around how they like to learn and want to operate, especially with technology. Sure. So my advice out there, when you're a learning and development professional, you need to really know your audience. So whether they be sales professionals you're providing training for, or whether it's engineers, you do need to have a good understanding of how they think and operate.
No better example really than the learning as in the doing. If you're talking about music, developing your musical talent, it's all in the doing. If you're learning instruments, I think it's quite, it's more as terms.
That's right. I would agree in that area, language learning arguably as well. And the more immersive you make it, the more rapid your learning curves are typically, because it's built into that is repetition and practice, and also deliberate practice. That's if people want to look that up. But deliberate practice is really critical, and musicians do it by nature. Sports people do it by nature, just naturally. But then it starts to dissipate when we do other types of roles and jobs. In the UK, we're not particularly good as a whole at learning languages because we don't immerse ourselves. There's no cultural driver to do it. Whereas you go to other countries, there is a cultural driver to immerse yourself and to deliberately practice the learning of English. So that's why it's easier.
There's an interesting book, I don't know if you're familiar with it, Lars, I'm going slightly off point here, but it's an interesting book called Bounce, which talks about 10,000 hours of practice, but it's very much meaningful, deliberate practice that gets you to the top of any, whether it's musical instruments or sports, whatever it might be. But if you're having those 10,000 hours of meaningful, deliberate practice, that you're always advancing your learning, then it claims you can kind of get to the top of any of the things that you want to get to the top of within that chosen professional sport. Quite interesting.
It is. The 10,000 hours is slightly dubious in my book, but the principle of deliberate practice is well researched and definitely something that should be built into our learning solution.
But you may have already lent yourself towards it a little bit with the musical piece, and maybe I'm wrong, but if you didn't work in learning, what do you think you would be doing?
Well, my dream job was to be a film composer.
Oh, okay.
So that would be what I'd be attempting to do.
Great. Fantastic. And now, slightly changing the question dynamic here, but if you could be given any superpower, what would it be?
Any superpower? My superpower would be the ability to generate superpowers.
Nice. You've thought about that one. If you haven't, that's very clever. Excellent.
I literally just thought of that one.
Well, it's the best answer I've had so far, I think. And that kind of trumps any other answer I'll probably ever get in the future as well. Okay, we'll run with that. I like that. Very good. Okay, so we're going to dive back into some final questions for those L&D professionals out there that want to find out a little bit more about your view on what the main priorities should be for L&D.
The L&D Podcast. Final questions to help listeners engage, learn and perform.
You've obviously worked extensively within learning for a long, long time, and I know that there's the demands of commercial organisations between private and higher education are going to be different. I just wondered if you, from your perspective, from a learning perspective, if you feel the learning demands of commercial enterprises and educational organisations are different, or you think they're similar, or are they a bit of both?
If you look at both the workplace and higher education, you can see that things are evolving at pace and in different ways. So there's a lot of challenges to the higher education world and in how they're offering the sort of learning experience, but they've been adopting learning technology for a good while, and they've been experimenting, with it to deliver hopefully a more effective, or certainly a more efficient learning experience. I think that the goals are slightly different in the sense of if you've got a pure academic approach, the sort of learning experience is a little distinct from a more practical sort of work or sort of job roles that you'd be training to do in a commercial sense. But that said, there is a whole area called competency-based education, and that's been growing, especially in the US as an area where much more vocationally driven curricula are being created, and where that's growing and where that's in place, then there's actually quite a lot of similarity actually between the workplace dynamics and the sort of structures of the learning experience and the sort of learning management requirements behind it. But there are some bigger issues sort of arising. I'm sure you've heard anecdotes of the commercial world struggling to sort of assimilate graduates coming into the workplace because there's quite a disconnect in terms of skill sets, and in fact, you'll appreciate this in particular from a recruitment perspective. And so there is a difference there. There's also, I think, some similarities in terms of sometimes the oversimplistic adoption and use of technology and offering that to their audiences. So higher education offering it to students, they may have a learning platform in place, and really all they're using it for is as a repository for documents. and PowerPoint slides and asking students to work through that, and not necessarily leveraging it in any other more sophisticated way. Still useful because it's providing easier access to things, but it's not necessarily a particularly sophisticated use case. And that can often mimic what happens in a commercial organization where there's a over focus on sort of one hit courses that you ask people to go on to, taking them out of the workplace. And they do them and they complete them and they tick the box, and then they come back into the workplace. And as I mentioned before, they forget it all. And nothing really changes. So the outcome on both of those can be, you're not really helping the learning process as much as you think you are. And the dynamics of the individual as a learner, whether you're in a job role, or whether you're a student, those things are quite similar. And we're now in an age where we carry around with us a really fantastic learning device, through our phone and through search engines and through our ability to connect with anyone and everyone we need. Used correctly, that's very powerful.
Sure.
It massively accelerates the ability to learn, certainly in unstructured ways. When it comes to higher education, which offers a curricula and a sort of a longer term sort of path from one set of understanding to a new set with new skills, then that pedagogical design approach is really important. In the commercial world, there's lots of challenges to that, not least because a lot of L&D departments may not have that deep understanding of how to structure those things, but equally their world moves quickly. And you can't spend a long time building complicated structures if they're just going to go out of date.
Yeah, sure. Instantly. I think, from my perspective, very much a personal perspective here, but I think it's almost more essential than ever that higher education establishments take advantage of some of the kind of technologies that Totara or other organizations offer. Because if I use marketing recruitment as an example, commercial enterprises now will often find that there's a marketing graduate coming out, but what they've learned over the last 3 years is almost the first 2 years is already out of date. Their learning for this person is already out of date. So it moves so quickly now that sometimes you can lose the power, if you like, or some of the learning outcomes during a 3-year degree. The commercial world and technology world is moving much faster than speed it's being taught at. So if you're able to respond quickly by using platforms like Totara within a higher educational framework or business, I think it's a smarter use of a smarter way to train, a smarter way to learn, because you're still immersed within that educational environment. So hopefully the learning is deliberate, but hopefully you remain up to speed when you come out of that. You do graduate, you're looking for work, you're not out of date with what you've been learning. And I think at the moment there's a disconnect between what commercial employers are looking for at graduate level, because they are sometimes now not going straight to universities for their people, because they feel that actually those that sometimes didn't go to university but have been immersed in particular social platforms or whatever it might be at that level, that they're actually sometimes more on the pulse. So I think that between those graduating and those that didn't go and the skills that employers are looking for, I think there's an opportunity for our higher education organizations to really embrace the new technology that companies like Totara offer. I think it'll only benefit graduates if they're able to learn in that way.
Indeed. And the good news is that a lot of students coming out of universities will actually find Totara quite familiar, because some of the roots of Totara reside in a platform called Moodle, and Moodle is very well used in the higher education sector. So an organisation that's using Totara and hiring a graduate, they'd see that it'd be quite easy for them to sort of get going with it.
Great. So right now, what do you think the main priorities are or should be for L&D teams? Are there any sort of key takeaways or practical steps that you think L&D teams could be looking at right now that perhaps upon listening to this podcast, they can immediately go away and start to implement?
That's a good question. L&D teams, I think it's never been so exciting for them, but equally it's never been so critical for them to assert themselves and put their hands up and say, we can make a powerful difference to the performance of this organization if we have a more strategic outlook and seat at the table, as it were, at an organization. So if you take that back to, what are the key differentiators for an organization to thrive in the future, or even now, it is how they manage and develop the culture of those people and the skills and development of those those staff so that they can perform well in the roles they have now, but also prepare them to be agile enough to change those jobs and those roles when they need to. And so from an L&D perspective, that means those teams need to have a deeper understanding of the learning technology in front of them. And that means acquiring some new skills themselves. That means having a deeper understanding of how learning really works in terms of not the sort of learning sort of theories that I think are quite popular in L&D, but more deeper research driven or research backed evident sort of dynamics of how learning does facilitate itself in practice. So, and that takes work, and it takes an interest in doing so, and it also needs support from the leadership teams that they report to give them the space and time, and to maybe even restructure those L&D teams to include those sorts of skills and resources. So, in terms of a practical step, then that any L&D team or person listening to this is that we have actually made a home for a curricula that is absolutely aimed at the modern L&D professional or learning professional. And it's called Skills Journey, and it sits in our Totara community. And if you go in there, then you can explore it in more depth. But what it's aimed at doing is it is actually to practice those skills. There's a lot going on, and it's important that people understand what they are presented by various vendors out there. There's lots of terminology such as, micro learning, gamification, learning coach bots, sort of virtual reality, immersive technologies. There's a lot of things that are being discussed and talked about, but they're not all of them relevant to any one particular organization at this precise time. So it's absolutely critical that those L&D teams feel confident in their knowledge of assessing what will work for their people.
And I don't need to be a Totara. I don't need to be using Totara to be able to access that community.
No, exactly. It's free. Right. It's a free account. Anyone can come in with a learning and development sort of interest, the opportunity to interact with thousands of others around the world. So it's quite a powerful network.
I'll make sure I put a link to that as well if anyone's interested in getting involved. Check out the episode notes, and you'll hopefully give it a click straight through to check it out in more detail. Fantastic. Now, I know we have a mutual friend in Sean Wild, CEO at Think Learning. You mentioned Think being one of the partners of Totara, and they're a company that sponsored this L&D podcast. They are one of your Totara Platinum partners. So what are the key things you would look for in a Totara partner?
What's great about our partner network is it is like an ecosystem. So there's no one shape or size of partner necessarily, but one characteristic that binds them all is that they share that belief with us that open technology is strategically a smarter investment choice over other approaches, and that as a partner they can see how they can offer a richer, more flexible solution to their customers as a result. And I know Sean and the Think team do that very well. So the other aspects of a partner, clearly they need to demonstrate a good understanding of the technology itself, and have the skills and ability to extend it if need be and operate with it. They need to understand how learning does work, and also how it doesn't work inside large organizations or even small organizations. So, around our partner network, you'll see some will be very, if you like, learning content solution focused, and that the platform that Totara is used to sort of provide the home for that. You'll find other partners who are very focused on the technology sort of implementation and configuration itself, and will focus on extending it to integrate with other systems and really sort of embed it inside the organization. So more technology oriented focus. We have a good spread there's actually 95 of them now around the world. So there's a good number of them, and there's always room for more. So we're keen to extend that network because it's a complementary thing, and that as we get more partners involved, the more markets and the more sort of sector specific solutions can be made available. And that will actually ultimately benefit all.
Fantastic. Now, last question before we enter the L&D Vault. It does make sense for me to ask you why L&D professionals listening to this podcast should be encouraged to embrace open technology. I know that Totara believe that with their open technology, it allows it to be more flexible, more innovative. It's a very innovative platform, which you've mentioned on this podcast means it can evolve at a pace that hopefully will match the demands of the modern workplace. But are there any other areas perhaps we haven't discussed that, if you had to give one more kind of advocate point, if you like, as to why L&D teams should perhaps, if they're not already, embrace open technology, what would it be?
Well, I think it's for them to think carefully about how they buy learning technology going forward, and to think about how it connects strategically. So if they're asking themselves the question, okay, I'm buying a platform, I know I need to manage my learning community, my audience. How am I going to do that? What's the pace? At what point are things going to change? How certain am I that they're going to change, and how certain am I that it's going to happen in uncertain ways, which is probably very likely. So, and in all of those circumstances, you've got to think about how, if you were to buy some technology, you find yourself in a situation where you do need to change, and you need to change at your own pace. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're locked in either commercially or in a technology sense that you literally can't do anything with it. You either just have to start again elsewhere, so you literally stop and start again, or, as it actually happens in many cases, there's a sense of drift, and you can get 6 months, 12 months, even 18 months can drift by, where your target audience loses interest. You're not really getting any real value from the platform that you invested in. And that's because you were hamstrung.
Sure.
With an open technology approach, you're in control, so you can decide what happens.
It allows you, as you mentioned, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I guess it allows them to keep ahead of the curve as well. It's quite adaptive. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
So we're going to open the L&D vault.
Opening the L&D vault.
What is the one piece of advice you would give to someone working in learning and development right now?
Well, I'll return to that topic of skills. They're a learning professional. That means they need to know a lot about learning and development. They need to keep abreast of that. And slightly in a slightly sort of blunt way, it's time to level up. The L&D needs to take a more strategic role in their organizations if they're going to stay relevant. Otherwise, they will, lose relevance. Those skills are shifting. They need a more solid understanding of digital communication and the new technologies that are shaping or reshaping current jobs and workflows and processes. It's quite complex, and that should be seen as an opportunity for development for themselves, and that recognizing that it's as much about finding ways to support performance as it is over creating structured training. It's being able to understand when to apply what, and that I think offers significant strategic value to business going forward. And they will stay relevant as a result.
Fantastic answer. I have to say, I think that answer is probably relevant to more than just L&D as well. I think it's an organizational-wide advice you could pass on to those working in human resources, payroll, marketing, whatever it might be. I think the digital landscape, as you say, is changing so quickly that people need to stay relevant and be proactive about making those changes. A fantastic response. Thank you. So, Lars, when you look at the L&D profession from an Eagles viewpoint, what do you think is holding the industry back?
I think it's that confidence and feeling confident that they've got the right strategic message to advise and guide their leadership. I think that because of that lack of confidence, it means they don't get taken as seriously as they should. They're often order takers rather than viewed as a trusted advisor and shaper of business strategy. Now, there are opportunities there. They can do that. It means acquiring some new skills and understanding how technology is impacting both what they do as well as what it's impacting across their businesses in a broader sense anyway. So the opportunity is absolutely there to embed learning into these new workflows and processes that are happening anyway. And there will be an element of automation that can work well, but they've got to be in a position to advise where applying some technology may be actually not such a good idea as well. So it's that intelligent understanding and being able to communicate that persuasively is quite critical.
Brilliant. If we're sitting here a year from now celebrating what a great year it's been for you or for Totara as a business, what will you have hoped to have achieved?
Well, I would love to be sitting here looking at the Totara community itself and seeing that it's grown significantly and it's connected more thousands of learning professionals across the world, and that they're sharing best practice. we're already seeing evidence of that already, but the potential there, and this is what I find very exciting because of the reach of the Totara technology across the world, is that we can support that leveling up process, if you like, of leveling up L&D to meet those digital challenges of the workplace. I think that's got to happen if the workplace is going to be supportive in positive ways, for people in their work. There's a lot of talk of automation. There's a lot of talk of, the loss of whole job areas and sectors. And yes, that may well happen, but more positively or more optimistically, there's going to be a transformation of jobs into other types of jobs, and the learning community has a key role in helping that transition happen.
Sure, I agree. I think some of these studies are headline making as well. I think if you look beneath the surface it's the BBC study that scared people, talk about how many jobs might be automated, but actually it's a lot of these studies refer to tasks within jobs being automated as opposed to the full job itself. And I think for those of you that might be out there listening, fearful that perhaps your role is one of those that is on that list of being automated, be rest assured it's going to be unlikely that entire professions are going to be automated. It's the tasks within the jobs, I think, that might change, which hopefully will give people more time. If the simple sort of mundane type tasks can be automated, then it will give L&D professionals more time to spend on that strategic element you were talking about before, and really sort of driving strategic change, because hopefully they'll have a little bit more time to do so.
Absolutely. And, there's much more nuanced, I think, the argument around artificial intelligence and machine learning and all of those things. Yes, it's going to be transformational. However, as you've just pointed out, it's much more targeted, and it should be seen and harnessed in a positive way, absolutely, I think, and not seen as an outright threat.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question. What is the one piece of advice you would give to someone who is embarking on a career in learning and development?
Whatever happens, learning is fundamental to human existence. So if you see it that way, then learning and development, it will play a much more strategic role in the future. So those who do make that transition will survive, as it were. The skills will change as well throughout that. And the exciting thing is that we're just at the beginning in understanding how the learning process really works. So my advice to those who are interested in developing a career as a learning professional, well, I think it's going to get genuinely more professional, shall we say? Yeah, and those who will succeed, I think, need to be curious. They need to be critical of sort of traditional beliefs and views, and be much more sort of evidence-based and research-based. They do need to keep abreast of technology as it develops, AI, immersive technologies, etc. However, absolutely don't neglect the social interaction and the communication that underpins all workplaces. Oh. We're social animals at heart, and that's never going to go away. So, yeah, exciting times lie ahead. Brilliant. So, yeah, please.
Brilliant way to finish the podcast. Thanks ever so much. Exciting times ahead for those either working in L&D already or indeed embarking on a career in learning and development for the future. So, listen, thanks ever so much, Lars, for joining me on this L&D podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on board, and some really interesting and fascinating insights into both Totara and also the industry as a whole. So thank you ever so much. You can also go to their website, which is totaralearning.com. And on that website, you can actually request a demo if you're interested in the software. There is resources and obviously the 200 plus case studies that Lars mentioned in the podcast, as well as various other links that you can go to regarding solutions partners and so on and so forth. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that. That's to totaralearning.com. Apart from that, I'd just like to say a huge thank you, Lars, for joining me today. It's been a really interesting and fascinating insight into the world of L&D, and I will look forward to speaking to you all again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the L&D Podcast with your host, Nick Day of JGA Recruitment, specialist HR recruiters. This podcast has been sponsored by Think Learning. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please review it, share it, and subscribe so you never miss a future episode.